Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes and we will get started. Okay, good morning. Thank you for joining us. We are so thrilled to be with you today and share what we saw at CES. We've got an incredible lineup of presenters who are going to help us cover off on a range of topics. We're going to start off with our takeaways from the show, and then we're going to get into some deep dives around the metaverse, DE&I and accessibility, green tech, automotive and mobility, and then, of course, everyone's favorite consumer gadgets and buzzy launches. So CES this year's theme was how innovation is addressing global challenges, which is a fitting theme for a world that seems to have been pretty relentlessly up against adversity in the forms of climate change, wars, pandemics. We have collectively been through it. And so as we reflect on the last few years, we've been able to see firsthand some of the value that innovation creates. Take the vaccine, for example. It has shown us that we can overcome limitations and open up new frontiers at unprecedented speeds when we all work together with a shared goal. And as divisive as things has seemed, in some strange way, it ultimately brought us back together with a reinvigorated focus on what matters most. And we saw that coming to life at a more human-centered CES. And while past year's shows have been dominated by big TVs, bendable phones, robot cat butts, which I believe was an actual thing, this year we saw the most energy and excitement around innovation with impact. And I think the best example of this was the John Deere keynote presentation. And there was this awesome quote around how they're able to continue innovating at such a fast speed. And it's pretty obvious, but one that I think is easy to forget, which is that they just pay attention to the things that farmers actually want and need and use that as the groundwork to find solutions. And I think that's a great thing for us to remember as well as we think about our role as marketers. But practical, useful, resourceful were terms we heard a lot about this year. And of course, there will always be color changing cars and dog robots, but they seem to have captured less hearts and less headlines than, say, the toilet that can tell you all about your health. So ultimately, it wasn't surprising then that what emerged as some of the most prominent topics at CES were directly tied to the things that are top of mind for humans today, things that are going to keep humanity moving forward and help us face some of the challenges we're up against today. The first one, connectivity, whether that's to other people, to devices, to bringing us experiences that connect us to home and work. Sustainability, which is a pretty obvious one. And then lastly, health. However, there was a clear missing piece in the show, and I think we all felt that in a big way.
Hey everyone, I am Danisha Lomax, head of client inclusivity here at Digitas. And yes, you're exactly right, Morgan. As a first-time CES attendee, but long-time believer in tech being a bridge that connects people and connects, through all types of different ways and capabilities, I truly felt like there could have been more cultural and community efforts on the main floor. If this is truly one of the industry's biggest moments to kind of shine, there really is an opportunity to lead from the margins and ensure that we are making space for all those intersections and multiple identities to have a place and a presence on the main floor of the event. But not for nothing, the team did find a few things that I want to just spend a little bit of time kind of talking through in the presence on the floor. So I know it's all been impressed, but the beauty brand L'Oreal really brought to innovations that I think were really grounded in cultural inclusion and tech innovation. The one I'm going to be talking about is the HAPTA tool. So it is truly a tool that helps anyone with limited fine motor skills be able to apply lipstick. So this was really their moment to center the disabled community. And what I also thought was beautiful about this was the product release was told through the personal story of Janera. If you've watched the video, I encourage you all to, but Janera is a New Yorker. She's a beauty enthusiast. She's a woman of color, specifically Afro-Latina. And she talked about the tool being so important in her beauty routine because it brought back an element of independence that she might have been missing. She also told us a little bit more about her personal story as a disabled person. And so again, just a really beautiful display of how a tool can be seen through the intersectional lens of someone who's disabled and also a woman of color and what that brings to her daily life. I think it was also worth noting after doing some more research that the people behind the product innovation and ideation, there were also women of color. So true form and display of inclusion behind the scenes, inclusion as told through the lens of a personal story and through the marketing. Another product that was also kind of shown, not on the main room floor, but I do want to give Kayla her propers because Kayla Austin is a 19-year-old HBCU sophomore at Howard University. I know we got some people out there that rep Howard really hard, but she actually started doing some research when she was 12 years old. And she created this tool product called My Gun's Been Moved Smart Pad. And through her research, she found that there were a lot of gun-related harm that was kind of happening in homes and really wanted to help parents and those with children and teens figure out a solution. So from 12 until 19, she'd been working on this product. And if the gun is moved and it's sitting on that smart pad, parents, anyone in the household will get a notification, and there's a multi-step process to solution. So it just really is another reminder that age has no limitation when it comes to building and creating tools that can really help anyone in the community. Lastly, I want to talk about Mayavana. Mayavana is a small Black-owned business out of Atlanta, and it's actually run by a former Georgia Tech science major. Her name is Candace Mitchell-Harris, and word on the street is she's been touted as the Madam CJ Walker of tech. But basically, this tool allows anyone with textured hair to take a picture of their hair, upload it to the platform, and really start to get solutions on what products to use for their hair. So people with textured hair, again, people of color can really find a way to get solutions for their textured hair, which I think is really important as we talk about texturism and colorism in this industry. So those were just a few unexpected finds that we saw. Definitely room for more, and hope to see more of that next year at CES.
Thank you, Danisha. So moving into some additional deep dives, we're going to talk through the metaverse, accessibility, green tech, automotive and mobility, and consumer gadgets and buzzy launches. First up, everybody's favorite hot topic right now, the metaverse.
Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everyone. My name's Nora Barnicle, and I work in consumer insights out of the Boston office. And as Morgan said, I got to dive into one of the hottest topics this year at CES, the metaverse, of course. And once we were on the showroom floor and able to look past the glitz and the glam of the high-priced headsets and the fancy wearables, we were able to see some really practical use cases of the virtual worlds. So everything from making the hybrid workplace more seamless to literally bringing a sense of smell to the metaverse. We saw technology really advance this year. All that being said, we're not quite sure we're there yet in terms of mass consumer adoption. So as we flip through the following slides, I just want us as marketers, as brands, to think about ways to build the metaverse around the consumers themselves and to build experiences that are really worthwhile for consumers and B2B purposes. So a really great example of that is actually the metaverse for the enterprise. Last year at CES, we learned about the term digital twin. And this year we saw that evolve from concept to reality with some practical solutions. So a digital twin is essentially the real world version of an act or action you're committing in or acting on in the metaverse. So think about a factory worker. Instead of actually working on the factory line, they could be at home on a computer screen and their avatar is working in the factory connected to a real life robot that is doing that act, doing that part of the assembly line in person. So making for a more efficient and safer workplace. And one example of this we saw that had a lot of hype on the showroom floor was the Magic Leap goggles. So this technology uses large-scale AI to deploy digital twin technology over real physical surfaces. So think about the idea of someone working in a warehouse and they're restocking shelves. They can wear the goggles and they can see an empty warehouse in front of them, but by wearing the goggles, they can understand which product should be stocked here versus over here. And a real life implication we've seen so far that's exciting and a little nerve-wracking is the idea that the FDA actually recently cleared this technology for use during surgery. So a physician can be operating on someone while also wearing these goggles, and the goggles will essentially overlay a 3D CAT scan or some sort of medical records over a patient so that the doctor can provide for better care. Another example we saw was the haptics gloves. So these bring touch to the metaverse through buzzing sensation, and they actually make virtual objects feel real when you pick them up in the metaverse. And what's interesting about this is that we saw haptics show up at the show last year, actually marketing itself towards gamers. And they've really shifted into the enterprise solution this year, targeting more enterprises for training simulations for remote employees. So they've really tapped into this white space, the idea of building a metaverse around experiences that add real value to consumers. So while we heard so much around the metaverse in 2022, and it seemed like every brand was jumping into it, we saw these experiences largely center around entertainment. So let's be like haptics. Let's think about this white space to really build these brand experiences that touch consumers where they are. And continuing in the enterprise line here, we saw the metaverse and the future of work a ton here at CES. We saw solutions that bring the physical and the digital world together, that term phygital. And one example of this came from Dell. So Dell came up with this concept NYX, and part of the technology is a 3D desktop, and that generates an avatar for a remote worker without the use of a headset. So the technology can track your eye movement, your hand movement, your facial expressions, building an avatar for you that's then projected in 3D in the physical office so that you're able to feel more present in the office with your non-remote colleagues. And then Concept NYX also has a separate VR headset, and that connects the virtual wearers with a whiteboard that they can share their ideas instantaneously with people working in the physical office. And then on the flip side, the people in the physical office can use a tablet to also interact with this virtual whiteboard. So really a deeper look into the future of collaboration here. And if we think about it as brands and as marketers, and we're trying to evolve with our colleagues and really retain top talent, we have to think about and be open to new ways of collaboration for employees both in the office and remote as well. And finally, bringing sense to the metaverse. So the idea of making the metaverse an even more immersive place. And we saw this a bit last year, but we've seen an explosion of vendors this year, an example of which being the Oat VR technology. And that's simply a headset you wear that has a cartridge that releases aromas that can be combined into thousands of personalized scents in the metaverse. So you could be at home wearing the goggles, but be meditating in a field of wildflowers and smell the flowers from your home. And this I found to be interesting because smell is actually connected with the creation of memories and emotion. So not only are you creating for a deeper brand experience, but perhaps a more memorable one. And then we saw another haptic glove example here with AI Silk. And these are interesting because beyond the built-in finger sensors, they also have built-in control buttons from your fingers, providing for a more immersive experience there because you don't have to have traditional hand controllers that sort of take away from your presence in the virtual space. And while these technologies have absolutely advanced and people at the showroom floor were making long lines to try them on themselves, I would say day-to-day consumer adoption of this, like I said earlier in the slides, it's just not quite there. So something to keep in mind in the years to come, but just with the high price points and the lack of integration across platforms, it may be a little bit futuristic for us at the moment, but all in all, a really exciting year for the metaverse at CES.
Thanks, Nora. I'm Nicole Hoover, product lead in Atlanta, and I'm going to talk to you about accessibility at this year's show. You know, where DE&I left us wanting more, we really felt like accessible tech were, front and center across many presentations and announcements this year. And so we are, going to share a little bit about our favorite findings, one that Danisha already touched on as well. But, in addition to that, we also have, the annual conferences and conversations around accessibility. So again, it was top of mind throughout the conference. But first, let's talk about L'Oreal. I am also very excited about HAPTA. In addition to all the great comments that Danisha already mentioned about their marketing and the product design, we did want to also mention that technology was originally created to solve a really practical need for folks in this community. It was leveraged ability to stabilize a utensil. So folks that had limited hand and arm mobility could feed themselves independently. And I love that functionality has been, leveraged and scaled for makeup application. And we know that there's opportunities for this to continue to scale in other ways. And so again, leveraging very practical functionality that serves a real need for this community to then continue to grow into other applications. Beauty products have the power to give us confidence. They help us express who we are as individuals. And for persons with disabilities, this can be uniquely challenging if we don't have the mobility to make that happen. And so, we're really excited about products like this, as well as Brow Magic, another product that was released this year that really allow folks to take more control of their beauty experience, regardless of any, disability experiences. Next, let's talk about a similar experience, but for gamers, right? This whole functionality was around how do we get more folks to use beauty? How do we get more folks to play in the gaming space in an accessible way? Adding accessibility features has been a core conversation for this market across the last couple of years. We're seeing new menus come to games. We are seeing, reduced barriers by adding second players or assistive players in some games. But this week's announcement from PlayStation sort of outshined all of the others because their partnership with Enable Gamers, Special Effect, and Stack Up, they really designed a customizable, configurable remote function that someone can use to play their PS5 in a way that makes the most sense for them. So whether that be, leveraging certain buttons or certain triggers, they can really customize all of these components to be the perfect handheld device for them. They can set that on a platform. They can use it in their hands if they have that functionality. It really is about leveraging solvable components so players can craft something that works based on their strength and range of motion and particular needs. And why we really loved this is, not only is it an example of accessible tech, but it is like a case study in inclusive product design. Very similar to John Deere working with farmers to find solutions for their customer base. PlayStation is working with players with disabilities to understand how they can, better leverage their experiences and participate in these games. And so we really loved how inclusive this product launch was. Even, quoting here their senior designer, it's really, there's no perfect right form factor. The form factor is whatever's best for each user. And so that individualization at the core of this product design makes it what's so special about it. So we're really excited about this. And finally, this is another product that I love. It's an app smartphone app from a company called Facility for folks in the dyslexia community who may have struggles with reading comprehension. We leverage text as a marketing community in so much of our communications. Text is, so much of what's out in the world, whether it be, instructional or brand messaging, but so much of that content cannot be consumed by individuals for lots of different reasons. And so what I love about this is a quick snapshot of any text out in the wild can be sort of reevaluated and reconfigured based on someone's unique needs. So if I change the font size to make it larger or smaller for my personal reading needs, I can adjust the spacing. So if there is not enough gap between lines of content, this app will do that for me as well. For the dyslexic community in particular, highlighting, color coding the most commonly inverted letters and numbers, so that those can be called out specifically for those users. I also love that there's a voiceover functionality here, including language transactions. So if you are in a different country or you're doesn't speak the language of the font of the text, it will do that for you here. And then, of course, contrast color is really important topic from accessibility. This app will also change the context and the contrast of the content and the background. So really, regardless of how accessible the content is, this app has the ability to change that. And we love that because, not only is this community a fairly large size, 800 million people worldwide have dyslexia. We think that this app has the ability to impact so many other folks, whether they are visually impaired and need to expand the size. Obviously, our elderly community is continuing to grow. And so being able to support them as their visual needs change. But also, like I mentioned, folks traveling in different places, having the ability to read and interact with local content that may not be in their own personal language. So lots of exciting things here. Again, designed for a community with a community, but so much a case study in inclusive design because it does really make the experience of reading better for so many.
All right. Thanks, Nicole. It's great to see so much positive accessibility technology at CES this year. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Costello. I work in the technology group in the Boston office and battling a little bit of shaky home internet connection today. So hopefully I will stay with you guys the entire time here. But if I drop off, that's the nature of rural internet. So we'll see what happens. But I'm here to give you all the rundown of what we saw in the green tech and sustainability space at CES this year. And those were really huge trends and huge topics at CES 2023. There's no telling how many announcements from huge companies and tiny startups alike referenced green tech and sustainability, and that's great. But it's also really tricky territory for brands. And it's tricky because the commitments that brands make to sustainability and the environment, they can't just be greenwashing. They need to be sincere. They need to be backed by meaningful action. And, there is a risk, of course, that these announcements are just greenwashing. There was a report that came out from Accenture just before Thanksgiving that sort of put this into pretty sharp relief, I would say. That report found that 34% of the world's largest companies have committed to be net zero in their carbon output by 2050. But 93% of those companies are on track to miss that goal right now. That's a huge gap between commitment and action. And brands need to think about this because consumers expect that brands are going to deliver on their commitments to sustainability. These commitments can't just be name checking. Brands have to walk the walk. And if they don't, consumers today, and especially consumers in the future, are going to recognize that and they'll act accordingly. So with that as the context, let's take a look at a couple of the really interesting green tech and sustainability announcements from CES this year. This is probably my number one favorite green tech announcement from CES this year. It's from a company called Relief, and they've developed a technology to create paper not from wood pulp from trees the way we usually do, but by essentially recycling fallen leaves that fall off trees. And it's a fantastic technology from a green perspective, because obviously fallen leaves, significantly more renewable resource than trees, right? They're going to come back every season. And, they're usually considered to be waste, but we're taking something that is waste or is mulch at best and turning it into paper. And you can see, we've got a couple of pictures there. Those bags, those paper plates, those are made with relief paper. So transitioning to paper that's made from leaves could have a huge impact on deforestation, on tree growth, all of which connects to the warming of the climate, or hopefully decreasing the speed of the warming of the climate. Now, Relief faces two really big challenges. The first challenge is they're located in the Ukraine. So there's a war in Ukraine right now. And that, of course, makes life really difficult for everybody. And I can only imagine also very difficult for operating a startup. So that's one. The second challenge they're facing, they can only produce about 5,000 tons of paper a year right now. That's less than 1/1000% of the global annual demand for paper. So that's really a very small amount right now, but hopefully Relief can scale up over time, and we can see them make a big impact on our paper production in the world. So the second really interesting product is a robot. Every year at CES, there are a lot of robots. Morgan mentioned the robot cat butt earlier, which, really was a real thing. And, we should be really, really skeptical of the robots that we see at CES. Every year there are robots, and the next year, the ones we saw the previous year are gone. But I don't know that that's going to be the case with this one. This is the Clean Water Pathfinder robot from a company called ACWA Robotics in France. And the context with this robot is every year we lose about 120 million cubic meters of water from municipal water systems just due to leaky pipes. And that can be really hard to fix. It's hard to detect your leaks. It's hard to get in there and fix them, because these water utilities, of course, are underground, and many have been installed decades, if not centuries ago. So they weren't necessarily installed with the thoughts about sort of preventative maintenance that we have today. But what the Clean Water Pathfinder will do, it's a robot that you insert into a water system, and it swims up and down the network of pipes. It maps the water utility. It can detect leaks. It can also detect the thickness of pipes, which is a precursor indicator to when there are going to be leaks. It can detect water quality, it can detect water pressure, and it does all of that without disrupting the flow of water to customers. That's a pretty big deal. So making the future greener, of course, is going to require us to do more with the resources that we have today. And if we can do that by eliminating wasted water when we know that water is going to be at a premium in the future, that can have a really big impact. So really interesting robot to keep an eye on there. Next up is a product from a company called Ambient Photonics. This is a new photovoltaic cell, so basically, like a solar panel that can capture energy in low light situations. So the way Ambient Photonics is positioning this is as a replacement for single-use batteries. We saw Samsung last year or 2 years ago, I don't remember which, introduce a remote control that was pretty similar to this, the same basic idea, getting rid of single-use batteries. Because according to Ambient Photonics, 3 billion batteries go into landfills every year. It's a tremendous amount of waste. And when we think about the hazardous chemicals that are in batteries, that's a lot of, kind of harsh stuff to be putting into the environment. So the idea here from Ambient Photonics is to build this photovoltaic cell that can capture light from interior rooms. Think bedrooms, bathrooms, stores in malls that don't have a ready source of solar energy. And by capturing that low light and being able to store it, you can power low drain devices, TV remotes, digital signage on shelves, Internet of Things devices, which of course are going to be growing in their use going forward and are going to need some way to be powered. So what they showed here this year, it's not a product that's ready to ship. It's a proof of concept, but the concept is pretty great. Looking forward to seeing that proof sort of come through into the marketplace and hopefully seeing a reduction in those single-use batteries going forward. And then lastly, we heard a little bit earlier about the role that John Deere played at CES this year. And John Deere was really just one example of how hot farm tech and food tech was at CES. I've got 3 really quick things to talk about here, but there were easily 10 times this many just in this one section of green tech and sustainability. There's a ton of activity in this space. It's really, really interesting. So the first 2 things to think about are the SpectraPod from Manti Spectra and the 1/3 scanner. These are both products that are designed to help increase yield from farms and reduce food waste going forward. So the SpectraPod, that's that little gray sort of box over in the side of this slide. And you look at that and really it doesn't look like much. But what this is, it is a scanner that uses near infrared technology to scan produce while it's growing to allow farmers to know, where is food in its growing cycle, when should they harvest it for optimal yield, and how long will they have for shelf life and freshness of that food once they do harvest it. The 1/3 scanner is really similar, but it's not designed to be used by farmers. It's more for use in grocery stores and restaurants and things like that. It can also scan food, and it can give a shelf life prediction to within 24-hour accuracy of when food is going to spoil. So the name 1/3 for that company is based on the factoid that 1/3 of all food that's produced worldwide is wasted. So if we think about what I was saying earlier in terms of water conservation, we're going to have the same challenge going forward to waste less food. There were multiple tracks of events at CES this year, talking about how we'll build a food supply chain in a climate change future and in a future for a world with 10 billion population. Climate change is disrupting our ability to grow food, where we can grow it, the nutritional content of it. So these sorts of technologies are going to help us do more with the food we've got today and maximize that yield. And then lastly, this is another one that I was pretty excited about. It's a product called PhytoFat from a company called Lipid. So this is a plant-based fat that is designed to be put into plant-based meats to replicate the mouthfeel, the texture, the cooking properties, and the taste of animal fat. Cutting our meat consumption, changing to a plant-based diet, it's the #1 most impactful thing that an individual can do to cut their carbon footprint. And, we've seen a lot of kind of hype and a lot of trend in that direction in recent years with Beyond Meat and Impossible Meats and all of the other products that are on the marketplace in that category. But in the last 6 or 9 months, the growth has really stopped there. And you can think of a product like this as maybe being able to rekindle that growth a little bit. There is really a gap, I would say, between the quality of plant-based meats today and traditional meat. I have been a vegetarian for 27 years now, I think it is, and I've eaten a lot of bad plant-based meat, and it's gotten really good in the last few years, but clearly not enough to convert or at least open the marketplace to a wider audience. And so hopefully we can see this doing that. The PhytoFat already in use at plant-based burgers in a 500 restaurant coffee shop chain in Taiwan. So hopefully we'll see improvements made from that and to see that come into the US and other markets fairly soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. Hey everyone, my name is Matt McDonald and I am with our experience strategy team out of the Boston office, and I get to talk about automotive and mobility, and with CES that has very little to do with actually driving cars itself. So you may have noticed that the shift from gas to EV is in full swing. And so the EVs themselves are no longer the big story. And however, everything that we've saw this year seems to indicate that the market still has big plans for this new era. Electric trucks are the hottest form factor on the market right now, and they are making a big splash with a lot of market entrants coming into this space. And we're also seeing plenty of innovation and interesting things happening inside the cars themselves as we move away from the driving experience and into the in-car experience. And so here's a list of a few things that stood out to us in terms of automotive and mobility. So we'll kick things off with the Ram Revolution electric concept truck. So Ram has made it known that they're going to be entering the electric truck wars, and they brought the concept truck Revolution to CES this year. And it is definitely a concept truck. It had everything from rear opening, rear doors, a missing B-pillar, a reach-through frunk, which is probably my favorite word in the industry right now, a split tailgate, a built-in extendable bed, and what might be the most interesting third row seating I've seen. I'm not sure how comfortable or legal it would be in a production vehicle, but it is definitely worth talking about. And so, like I mentioned, trucks are the hottest form factor in EVs right now, with vehicles from Ford, Chevy, Rivian, GMC, and Tesla planned or in production. And so as we move towards mass EV adoption, converting this gigantic truck market is going to be a huge piece to the long-term plays. The next thing you may have heard about is the first output from the Sony Honda Mobility joint venture. It's called Afeela. And lots of people had lots of thoughts about the name, but I can tell you that the car itself was a clean-lined electric all-wheel drive sedan that I think looks pretty great. So when you take Honda's automotive know-how and Sony's electronic experience, you would anticipate getting the best of both worlds from that partnership. And I think that's what we're starting to see in Afeela. So beyond the actual car specs itself, the inside leaned heavily on Sony's expertise and used digital screens and physical controls, which we know drivers have a preference towards. And so production on the Afeela is not scheduled to deliver until 2026, with them taking orders a year further, but it's going to be something that'll definitely catch your eye once it does hit the road. Arguably the buzziest thing that happened in automotive during CES was from an established car company in the form of BMW's Vision D. So it's a great looking concept cars with a lot of things that are interesting about it. But the first thing that anybody's going to talk to you about, like Morgan mentioned, is that it can change colors. And so this is thanks to 240 e-ink displays that are paneled all over the car and that can change into any one of 32 different colors. And if you've seen it in person, I encourage you to go take a look at the videos. It is definitely a showstopper and one of the most interesting things I've seen. I'm not sure if it's going to be affordable or practical or legal again, but it really shows a future-facing vision of the exterior cars and the possibilities that we have with e-ink. Now, inside the car, BMW is also making a big bet on an AR platform that they're calling mixed reality. And so what that is an update on a traditional HUD-like system. And according to them, it is designed to give the drivers time to pay more attention to what's on the road and focus on driving, and then still be connected with the car and the world around them. Speaking of big bets on the inside, we saw a lot about the future of car UI, both in the short term and then way out in the future. So big concept stuff. So in the short term, we're looking at things like updates to Android Auto with a bunch of new features that are coming out. And this is Google's answer to Apple's CarPlay, which is starting to form partnerships where they will be integrated natively into important car systems, leveraging Apple's UI expertise into integrated car experiences. In the middle term, we're going to be talking about the Mercedes-Benz Hyperscreen, which is a pillar-to-pillar full dash digital screen that is really something. And despite being very big and very expensive, Mercedes is saying that its initial interest is so high that they may not be able to meet demand once they start rolling it out. And then way out on the horizon, we had a synthesis concept from Chrysler, which was meant to give you an idea of the car cabin of the future. And it was so focused on car UI that it didn't actually even have a steering wheel. And this featured everything from sensors to screens and a sort of futuristic exotic car cabin and a look at how things may evolve long into the future. And last, while we've talked about cars up until this point, I think that the electrification push has also had a big impact in personal mobility. And so we saw things like tiny little scooters that you could fold up and fit under your desk, or micro cars that look like golf carts and had solar charging roofs, and then high-powered, high-end electric bikes. And so what we're seeing is batteries are getting smaller and lighter, motors are getting powerful and more efficient, and engineers are getting used to working with these form factors and constraints. And so the evolution of the electric vehicles and the mainstream cars and trucks is trickling down into personal mobility. And we're finding other ways to have vehicles connect us with the world around us.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. I'm Mel, an associate creative director, and I'll take you through some cool stuff. We've already hit a bunch of buzzy product launches, but we got a couple more that just really captured our attention. First, we have Rememory, which is a product by the Korean brand DeepBrain that creates an AI experience of somebody who's passed away for people to interact with after they're gone. It's very Hollywood meets real life, but the really interesting thing here is kind of the process and thinking about how this exists, right? There's a 7-hour interview process before the person passes away that really captures who they are and, you know, how they interact, how they speak, their mannerisms, that allows these people to interact with their loved ones after they're gone. And how can we take this AI and how can we utilize it for production or for, you know, different advertising purposes in the future? Right now, it's just one storefront in Seoul in Korea, but, you know, this could, you know, take off and be used across different ways. Amazon Astro is another buzzy thing that was on the floor literally this year. It's Amazon's new robotic offering that can do everything from follow you around, monitor carbon monoxide in your home, you know, see where your toddler is and what they're doing, offer up, you know, a message from another room. And the thing here is that it kind of seems like this might be the first time people are open to adopting something that we've previously thought was too invasive. You know, thinking back on Amazon bringing Alexa into our homes, everyone has one. Mine's probably going to pick me up saying her name. But, you know, this is the kind of the next step from there. And it might be the first time that people are open to that. The one thing that we can think about here as Amazon and other brands bring these robotics into homes, how can they expand their core offerings? And how can we as, you know, thinkers and innovators bring different thinking into these new places that are going to be inside people's homes and under their roofs? This is a fun one. You know, in the pandemic era, people are working from home or living hybrid lifestyles. And something that's really risen to the forefront, as you know, this has been numerous years, is exercising while working or working out while working from home. And this is just a really fun example of kind of killing two birds with one stone. So this is a bike from Acer, and as you pedal the bike, not only are you working out, but you're charging your devices. So you've got your laptop and your phone on your desk here. You're moving your body. You know, it's proven to help you think better. You know, bring new ideas, but you're also charging your devices. So it's a little bit like hamster on a wheel, but at least you're getting more out of it than just moving. And last, immersive tech. There was just a ton of immersive tech at CES, from watching to gaming. You could see it woven through a lot of different verticals. These two here, I think, are really interesting as we think about how small screens live in people's homes, and how we can start to incorporate this kind of tech into our thinking for consumer campaigns. The Philips option here with the Sync app is going to be really easy to adopt because a ton of people already have Philips Hue lights in their homes. but how can we, take these things that people are already using and this new app and kind of bring a surprise and delight moment that breaks through for people who are watching TV with the Sync app. And then this other option is really truly immersive. And I think at this point, people don't necessarily have this tech in home. You can see how the Philips Hue app could eventually evolve. And it's a little hard to see in this image here, but it's essentially a visual that's projected on the wall that kind of breaks the screen, bringing the viewer experience just kind of all around you, immersive in your living space. Thank you, Mel. And thank you to all of our presenters and all of our Digitas team who were on the ground, scouring the floors. We had teams at home staying on top of it all. And thank you to everybody for joining us. We know there's a lot of competing demands for your time, so it means a lot that you chose to spend close to an hour here with us today. Today's content is going to be shared out to everybody who registered, but you can also find it by scanning the QR code, which will take you to our CES landing page. And on that landing page, you'll also find contact information for our innovation team, who's happy to talk through any of this in more detail or to answer any of the questions that you might have about CES or the content shared today. So thanks again and have a great rest of your day.